Beloved family under the hot Sahel sun, a pen moved across paper, and with that simple stroke, the ground shook beneath empires. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young soldier-turned-statesman, has signed a $7 billion energy covenant with Russia. Now hear me. This is not just about megawatts and money. This is about homes lit after sundown, schools humming with power, hospitals keeping children alive when night falls. This is about dignity flowing back to a land too long left in the dark. For centuries, outsiders dictated the rhythm of Africa's heartbeat. But today, a son of Burkina Faso dares to write a new score. He does not beg permission. He builds. He does not whisper compromise. He declares sovereignty, and the world is watching as Africa stands taller. Before we go deeper, subscribe and ring that bell. Join a fellowship that does not just follow headlines, but reads the signs of the times. Share this with a grandchild, because wisdom must travel. And now I ask you, elders, when the lights come on in Ouagadougou, whose shadows will finally end? Brothers and sisters, let us set the scene. Picture Burkina Faso, a land without a coastline, a land whose rivers dry up under the Sahel heat, a land where many nights the power lines fall silent. For decades, children have studied by candlelight, mothers have prayed over food spoiling in the dark, and hospitals have worked miracles with failing generators. Darkness has been both a burden and a symbol. And yet, into that darkness, a pen has written light. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the Burkinabè captain, the son of Ouagadougou, has stepped to the table of nations and signed what the world calls a $7 billion energy deal with Russia. They say history is written in books, but sometimes it is written in contracts. And this contract carries the weight of generations. It is not the first time whispers of partnership stirred in the Sahel. Back in 2023, a memorandum was signed with Russia's Rosatom to study nuclear power for peaceful use. 2 years later, in St. Petersburg, another agreement pledged cooperation in energy, in science, in technology. Piece by piece, the foundation was laid. But this, beloved, this is the cornerstone. This is the stone the builders once rejected that has now become the head of the corner. $7 billion is not just a number, it is infrastructure. Wires strung across villages where night has been the master. It is training, young engineers sent abroad to return with knowledge burning like fire in their bones. It is industry, factories that can finally hum, workshops that can finally produce, schools that can finally teach under steady light. It is agriculture. Harvests preserved, medicines refrigerated, families no longer forced to choose between feeding a child and buying a candle. Do not mistake this for a handshake of vanity. Traoré is not a man courting applause from foreign capitals. His eyes are on the homes of his people. His heartbeat is for the farmers, the teachers, the nurses, the children. Every watt of power, every mile of transmission line is a sermon that says, Africa's resources will serve Africa's children. But remember this too, my elders. Great promises come wrapped in great expectations. The world has seen contracts signed and dreams deferred. We have witnessed leaders pose for cameras while the poor remained in darkness. We must hold this covenant to the light. Is it truly for the people? Will it be managed with integrity? Will it resist the hands of corruption? Now, hear the preacher's rhythm. Not just a contract, not just a headline, not just a handshake. No, beloved, this is a test of sovereignty, a test of vision, a test of whether Burkina Faso can chart its own path without bending knee to any empire. And in this moment, Captain Traoré stands not only as a soldier of his land, but as a symbol for a continent. The youth see him as proof that one does not need foreign approval to lead with purpose. The elders see him as a spark of dignity long deferred. The world sees him as a challenge to the old rules. $7 billion, brothers and sisters. That is the drumbeat echoing from Ouagadougou to Washington, from Moscow to every boardroom in Europe. It is a number heavy with both promise and peril. And the question remains, will it light the homes of the people, or will it simply decorate the corridors of power? Because every light casts a shadow. And when a Sahel nation reaches for the switch, someone, somewhere, will be left standing in that shadow. Beloved, when news of the deal broke, it was not just the streets of Ouagadougou that stirred. Boardrooms in Washington grew restless. Capitals in Europe called emergency meetings. The old order felt a tremor. Because a land once dismissed as powerless had just declared itself powerful. The American Empire, long accustomed to dictating the price of Africa's future, was unsettled. Analysts spoke of strategic realignment. Officials muttered of national interests at risk. But beneath the polished phrases, the fear was plain. A Sahel nation, young and unyielding, had chosen Moscow over Washington. They did not expect the Burkinabè captain to step off their script. In Europe, the reaction was more measured, yet the anxiety was the same. Energy security, they called it. Geopolitical instability, they warned. But what they meant was simpler. Africa is no longer asking for permission. Africa is choosing its partners. Africa is daring to dance to its own drum. And Russia? Moscow smiled. For years, Russia sought footholds beyond sanctions, beyond isolation. This was not just business, it was symbolism. A reminder that in the heart of Africa, Moscow has friends, and that the Sahel is not a desert of influence, but fertile ground for new alliances. Yet beyond the corridors of power, the most important reaction was not in embassies, but in villages. Mothers whispered with hope, "Perhaps our children will finally study with light." Farmers dreamed aloud, "Perhaps our crops will last the season." Teachers prayed, "Perhaps our classrooms will hum with electricity." But listen closely, elders. The people also asked hard questions. Will these billions truly reach us? Or will they vanish into the pockets of men in suits? Will this deal bring power to the huts or only to the palaces? On social media, the storm raged. Videos praised Traoré as the light of Africa. Posts hailed him as a David standing before the Goliath of Western power. But amid the applause, there were warnings too. Some voices whispered of debt traps, of dependency, of the dangers of placing too much trust in a foreign giant. And here lies the preacher's rhythm. One hand applauds, one hand warns, one heart believes, one heart doubts. For every cheer of sovereignty, there was a murmur of caution. For every celebration of independence, there was a question about hidden costs. My beloved, remember the lessons of history. The same West that now frowns once promised aid with conditions attached. The same powers that cry instability once drew borders that divided brothers. But history also warns us, foreign promises, whether East or West, are never free. And so, as the drums beat louder, as the headlines flare brighter, we must ask, is this the birth of a new chapter or the repetition of an old story? Because let us be honest, power is never given without price. Every contract has small print. Every handshake leaves a mark. And though the deal was signed in the name of progress, progress has many faces. Africa has been here before. Leaders stood tall, voices thundered, agreements were signed. And yet the poor remained poor, the hungry remained hungry, the lights remained out. This time must be different. This time the covenant must not be with corporations, but with the people. And so I say again, not just a number, not just a headline, not just a contract. This is a crossroads, a choice between dignity fulfilled and dignity deferred. a choice between independence real and independence imagined. The reaction of the world tells us one thing. They are watching. But the reaction of the people tells us something greater. They are waiting. Waiting for the light. Waiting for justice. Waiting to see if Captain Traoré's pen writes not only history, but hope. And so I leave you with this question, beloved. If the power arrives, if the lights blaze across Burkina Faso, who will own the socket? Beloved, when a contract this large is signed, it does not simply echo in the halls of power. It ripples through markets, through classrooms, through the very kitchens where families cook their daily bread. Let us now sit with the consequences. Economically, $7 billion is a towering figure. If directed rightly, it could change the very rhythm of Burkina Faso. Imagine factories humming instead of silent, crops preserved in cold storage rather than rotting in the heat, hospitals lit brightly instead of flickering in darkness. A steady current of electricity could unlock industries long stifled, reduce dependence on costly imports, and open pathways for trade. But my elders, we must not let hope blind us to hard truth. Such vast investment can also mean vast debt. If the repayment terms are unjust, the people may bear a burden heavier than their shoulders can carry. Interest rates, hidden fees, and one-sided clauses can turn a blessing into a chain. Sovereignty is not just about signing a contract. It is about ensuring that contract does not enslave the future. Socially, the impact could be profound. With power, schools can extend hours. Students can learn not by candlelight, but by steady bulbs. Hospitals can refrigerate vaccines, power incubators, and keep life-saving machines running. Farmers can store grain, mothers can cook without fear of firewood shortages, and small businesses can thrive in towns once swallowed by night. Yet the preacher's warning rises. Will this promise be delivered to the villages, or will it stop at the capital? Will the current flow to the countryside, or only to the elite? Beloved, electricity can build unity, but it can also deepen inequality if only the rich neighborhoods are lit while the poor remain in shadow. Legally and politically, transparency is the test. We have seen too many contracts signed in secret. Too many leaders boast of deals whose terms the people never read. This must not be another hidden covenant. The people have a right to know the costs, the timelines, the safeguards. True sovereignty requires open books and open accountability. Technologically, we must not forget the skills required. Wires and turbines are not enough. It takes engineers, technicians, safety inspectors. Will this deal train Burkinabè youth to master the systems? Or will it leave the nation dependent on foreign experts forever? Real independence means not just buying equipment, but building capacity. And spiritually, there is a deeper lesson. Too often in Africa's history, contracts have been written in languages the people did not understand, sealed with signatures they never saw. Too often, promises of light have left only shadows. This time must be different. This time the elders must ask, the youth must question, and the leaders must answer. Let us frame it plainly, my family. $7 billion can either build a foundation of sovereignty, or it can become another monument to dependency. The ink on this paper is either a covenant with the people or a contract with tomorrow's creditors, and so I turn to you. The community gathered here, the elders who know history, the witnesses of struggle. If you were seated at that negotiation table, what 3 conditions would you demand for this deal to truly serve the people? Type your wisdom in the comments, because your counsel matters. We are not spectators of history. We are keepers of memory, and memory must speak. Because what comes after the ink dries is not just headlines. What comes after the ink dries is the audit. And the audit, beloved, is always harder than the signing. Beloved, we must now lift our eyes from Ouagadougou and see how this covenant reverberates across the earth. For every choice made in the Sahel, there is an echo in Washington, in Moscow, in Beijing, in Brussels. In the United States, analysts see more than an energy project. They see a shift in alignment. America has long relied on influence across Africa, whether through aid packages, trade restrictions, or military partnerships. But here is a Sahel nation saying, "We will chart our own course." To American ears, this sounds like rebellion. To African ears, it sounds like freedom. And so the halls of Congress murmur, wondering how to respond without pushing Africa further away. In Europe, the conversation turns to security. Leaders fear that Russian partnerships across the continent could undermine European leverage. They warn of instability, but beneath the rhetoric is a more human anxiety. Africa is no longer waiting at their door. The colonial past, 500 years long, is not a debt Africa intends to keep paying. Moscow, of course, sees opportunity. Sanctioned and isolated in other theaters, Russia finds in the Sahel both a partner and a platform. Energy, nuclear power, infrastructure, these are not only business deals but also symbols of presence, reminders that the world is no longer one polar. And China? China watches carefully. For decades, Beijing has poured billions into African infrastructure, carving its own path of influence. Now it sees Russia stepping boldly into territory where once it walked almost alone. For Africa, this rivalry may mean more offers, more deals, more opportunities. But it also carries the risk of new dependencies. But let us pause, beloved, and bring this closer to home. For the elders listening in Baltimore, in Detroit, in Atlanta, does this not stir memory? Once you marched in the streets for civil rights, demanding dignity denied. Once you watched as superpowers tugged at Africa like a rope in their Cold War. And now, in your lifetime, you see a young African leader defying old orders, insisting on sovereignty. This is more than policy. This is prophecy fulfilled. The world map is shifting, and the children of Africa are no longer pawns, but players. Yet let us remember, symbolism does not boil water. Pride does not power a hospital. A deal may shake the world, but only follow-through will light the homes of the poor. So hear this truth. The cameras may love the symbolism, but the people demand the substance. And yet, beloved, you cannot power a nation with symbolism. Beloved family, the ink has dried, the headlines have flared, the world has reacted. But what matters now is not the cameras nor the ceremonies. What matters is the road ahead, the daily work of turning paper into power, signatures into substance. Let us be practical. If this $7 billion covenant is to bless the people, 5 pillars must stand firm. First, transparency. The deal must be opened to the people. Let every clause, every timetable, every obligation be laid bare. A hidden contract cannot build trust. Second, affordable power. Electricity is not a luxury for elites. It is a necessity for life. Pricing must protect the poor. A deal that lights mansions but leaves huts dark is no deal at all. Third, training and knowledge transfer. Burkinabè youth must not merely watch foreigners operate the systems. They must become the engineers, the technicians, the guardians of their own grid. True independence is when the switch rests in local hands. Fourth, safety and accountability. Energy projects, especially of nuclear scale, require oversight beyond politics. Independent regulators, international safety standards, and community engagement must be in place. The people must never pay the price of shortcuts. Fifth, local value creation. Let not the billions flow back out of Africa through imports and contractors alone. Build the supply chains at home. Manufacture the cables, assemble the transformers, create jobs that keep wealth rooted in Burkinabè soil. These 5 pillars, beloved, are not theory. They are the difference between dignity and disappointment. between history made and history repeated. And here is where community matters. Diaspora voices, elders abroad, churches, and civic groups all have a role to play. Watch the progress. Demand updates, celebrate achievements, but question delays. The people must be the watchdogs, not only the witnesses. For Africa is rising, yes, but rising requires vigilance. Traoré's courage has opened a door, yet only discipline, honesty, and unity will carry the nation through that door into a brighter tomorrow. So I say, let the grid rise, but let the people rise with it. Let the wires hum, but let justice hum louder. Let the lights blaze, but let dignity shine brightest of all. And beloved, mark my words, the true test is not whether the deal was signed. The true test is whether 5 years from now, a child in a village can read by electric light, and a mother can cook without smoke filling her lungs. That is sovereignty. That is victory. We will watch the meters, not just the microphones. Beloved family, we have walked together through shadows and through light. We have seen how one pen stroke in Ouagadougou shook the thrones of empires. We have heard the hope of mothers, the doubts of elders, the reactions of nations. And now, as the dust settles, the question is not simply what was signed, but what will be lived. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not perfect, nor is any leader. But his courage to step away from dependency, his insistence that Africa's resources must serve Africa's children, that courage is a spark worth guarding. This is not only about Burkina Faso, it is about the spirit of a continent. Mark it down, beloved. Contracts will fade, headlines will move on, but the true measure of this moment will be written in the lives of ordinary people. Will the farmer have cold storage for his grain? Will the child study under steady light? Will the nurse power her machines through the night? That is the sermon that matters. And so we speak not only of Ibrahim Traoré Burkina Faso, but of an entire generation yearning to rise. We do not merely watch Africa news scroll by. We read it as prophecy, as testimony, as a call to action. For sovereignty is not won in a single day. It is guarded every day. Beloved, history is not written by those who wait. It is written by those who act. Traoré has acted. Now the people must hold him accountable, and the world must bear witness. And you, the elders tuning in, you carry wisdom the headlines cannot teach. Share it, speak it, pass it down. For the future belongs not just to the young, but to the wise who guide them. So I invite you, subscribe, share this message with a grandchild, and leave your counsel below. Tell us, what must Africa demand to make sure the light never goes out again? Because the story of Ibrahim Traoré Burkina Faso is still being written, and the pen, beloved, is not only in his hand, it is in ours.